Narayana Samarambam Vyasa Shankara Madhyamam Asmadacharya Paryantam Vande Guru Paramparam Om. Hi everybody, and welcome to this week's installment of End of Knowledge. My name is Vishnu Deva, and this week I'm going to answer the question, what is the difference between Maya and ignorance? I have heard that Ishwara is the self in association with Maya, and that the jiva is the self in association with ignorance. I was under the assumption that Maya and ignorance were the same thing. Okay? So that's what we're going to determine here, Is Maya and ignorance, Avidya, are they the same thing? Now first, we're going to have to define our terms here. This is a technical question with technical terms, so we're going to first talk about what exactly Maya is. Okay? Now, before I do that, in the question, the word self is used. So it says, I have heard that Ishwara is the self in association with Maya. Now, in the previous videos, I've been using the term Atma. Okay, Atma can be translated into self, but self can be a little bit of a problematic term owing to different schools of thought, modern psychology, etc. So I'm just going to use the term Atma in answering this question. And again, the definition that we've given for Atma is the conscious, indivisible, imperceptible, infinite inner essence of everything. All right? So, using that definition of Atma, we can say, all right, well, Scripture says that Atma is indivisible, meaning it can't be divided into more than one part. It's not a conglomeration of parts. Atma is Advaita, meaning not two or non-dual. All right, there is only Atma and it's one. All right, so if that's the case, then how can this world be explained? How is it then that there is this world of a multiplicity of different things? There's all manner of things that we experience. So how is this Atma, which is indivisible, how can it be possible that we also have this world of multiplicity? And the answer is that in Atma is a power called Maya. Okay? And to say that Atma is infinite, meaning limitless, it can't be limited by its own inability to appear to be limited. All right? So that's where Maya comes in. Maya is that which makes the impossible possible. Even though it's impossible for Atma to be two, or to be divided, or to be limited, Maya makes it possible to seem as if Atma is divided or made limited. Okay? And this power is composed of three different gunas. Gunas don't really have a proper translation into English, so we're going to just keep the word gunas, and we're going to explain what each one of them means. Okay? So we have Maya composed of three gunas. The first one is sattva, the second one is rajas, and the third one is tamas. All right? To explain what they mean, we're going to use a metaphor of a potter and a pot. Okay? If you're going to make a pot, all right, and a pot is going to be our symbol for creation, the entire universe. Okay? How is that going to happen? Well, first of all, to have the pot, there has to be the idea of the pot first. All right, you can't create something if you don't have an idea for it first. So we have the intelligence or the idea, and also the required skill that comes with that. You can have the idea. We can have a potter that has an idea to make a pot, and yet that potter must also have the skill to be able to do that. All right? Now, that is the representation of the guna sattva. All right? Sattva is the quality of Maya that allows for knowledge, intelligence, or creativity. All right? All of which are required to have a creation in the first place, because if there's no idea for the creation or no skill to be able to put it together and maintain it, then you're not going to get a creation. All right, that's one aspect of it. And you also too, if you have a creation and once it's there also has to be the ability to, or the skill to maintain its existence. Okay, so we start with that. Sattva is the first one. Then in our pot metaphor, potter has idea, okay, has intelligence and skill, that's sattva. Now potter needs to have a material with which to make his pot from. Okay, you can have an idea and you can have the skill, but if our potter doesn't have doesn't have material to work with, there's not going to be a pot. Okay, so potter has to have clay to make his creation, the pot. All right, and the clay is representative of the guna tamas. All right, tamas is something that represents the quality of substance, or in the case of the creation, we can say matter. It also represents inertia, meaning keeping something from changing over time. Okay, so if we've got our potter with his intelligence and skill, sattva, and the material, the substance, tamas, then do we have a pot? The answer is no. We've just got a guy sitting there with the intelligence and skill staring at a lump of clay. All right, there has to then be a third factor, and that brings us to rajas. All right, rajas is power. All right, power. It is also, energy, the ability or the quality of change. All right, or transformation. The potter here, if he has his idea, he has his substance, he also must have the power to transform that substance into the final creation, which is the pot. Okay? Now, one thing has to be said about this metaphor. All right? We're using this potter and pot to make the metaphor for Maya, and its three powers or qualities: sattva, rajas, and tamas, the three gunas. Okay? Now, in that metaphor of the potter and the potter is separate from the pot that he creates. Okay? But Maya is one thing. It's the intelligence, the sattva, it is the substance, the tamas, and it is also the power that transforms the substance, the rajas, all in one thing. All right, it is one deal. Now, of course, when we have all of this together, what do we call that? The other name for that then is Ishwara. Okay, so Ishwara means what? Ishwara means the entire creation, the intelligence that thinks up the creation and maintains its functioning, as well as the power that transforms the substance of the creation into the creation, changes the creation from moment to moment, destroys and dissolves new forms and then brings new forms into existence. All of that collectively is called Ishwara. Okay? So we say that that is Atma in association with that power, Maya, is called Ishwara. Now, what does that mean? Association, in association with Maya. All right? Now, technically, since Atma is indivisible, not two, there's nothing for it to associate with. That's something to make clear up front. All right? Anytime that we're talking about Maya, we're talking about something that is as if. Okay? It seems to be that way. All right? There seems to be a creation. Upon investigation, you'll see that there is not actually a creation, but only Atma appearing to be a creation. But that's something to get into at a later point. We're just going to say simply that there appears to be Atma and this thing that it associates with called Maya. That association is called Upadi. All right, so Maya is called an Upadi, and an Upadi is something that makes something else appear to be other than what it is, or something that seems to lend its attributes to something that does not possess those attributes. Okay, you can think of it like this. I've got a glass of water here. Water has no form of its own. It's formless. Okay? Same way. Atma has no form. It's formless. Now, in association with this cup, water appears to take on a form. You know, the form of the cup. It doesn't actually take on that form. It just appears to. The attribute of form appears to belong to the water because it is in association with this cup. In the same way that Atma, in association with Maya, the power that can make Atma appear to be something other than it is, Atma appears to take on the forms and names of this creation, even though itself is always formless. Okay, another way to look at it would be to think of if the water was put in a cup that was colored. Okay, so if you put water in a blue cup, even though the water itself is clear, it appears to be blue inside the blue cup. When it's associated with that blue cup, then it appears to be blue, even though the blueness does not ever belong to the water, and just because it's associated with the cup, it never actually becomes blue. Okay, so Atma in association with that Maya, even though it has no form, even though it cannot be divided, even though it cannot be limited, it simply appears to be limited in conjunction with that Maya, and that association is called Upadi. And when Atma is associated with the Upadi called Maya, we call that Ishwara. Okay, why do the two have to be together? Well, because Maya, the skill, the power, and the substance of the creation, none of that can be possible without Chaitanya. Okay, and that means, that describes the nature of Atma being consciousness. Okay, you can't have any of those things happen without consciousness. Try to have intelligence, skill, or power without consciousness, it's not possible. Okay, so we say those two are associated in that sense. Now, the question asks, what's the difference between Maya and ignorance? You know, what's the difference between the association of Maya with Atma being called Ishwara and the association of ignorance with Atma being called jiva? Okay, so one of the aspects of Maya, as we said, one of the gunas is tamas. All right. Now, tamas has a particular power, a shakti, called avarana shakti. All right. Now, avarana means cloud. Now, what does a cloud do? A cloud, when it passes across the sun, seems to obscure the sun. All right, now it may cover the sun, but the sun is still there. The sun is still shining. The sun is still the same sun that it always is. Okay, so we have to keep that in mind as we use this kind of metaphor of clouding or veiling. All right, this veiling power, the Avarana Shakti. We have to keep that in mind because although Maya has this power to veil Atma, it doesn't actually ever change Atma or really cover Atma. It just seems to. Okay. Now, what does that mean? All right. So the only way for there to be ignorance or avidya is if the nature of Atma appears to be covered. Okay. The definition of avidya is simply the identification with the individual person. All right, the individual person being the body and the mind and all of the aspects of that mind, one of which being the notion of I. Okay, the ahamkara, the I maker, the thought that says, hey, I am doing this, I am doing that, I am this body, I am this mind. The identification with the body, the mind, its attributes and activities is what constitutes avidya or ignorance. Because the truth of the matter is that we are always Atma, that's our true nature, but simply because our nature is clouded from us, is concealed or veiled from us, then we are only able to identify with the objects, the body, the mind, that are appearing in us. Okay? So that is the definition of avidya and ignorance. Okay? Tamas allows the true nature of yourself to be covered. All right? The other part of Maya, Rajas, is called Vikshepa Shakti, and that means the power to project. Once the nature of yourself is obscured, the objects are able to be projected onto the limitless, formless screen, so to speak, of Atma, and then that identification with those objects is then possible. Okay, so that is the definition of ignorance, the identification with that body and mind. Now, what do you have then? The body and mind then is what the individual person is what is the definition of the term jiva. Okay, so it can be looked at like this. Why would we make a distinction? Tamas, has the power of ignorance or avidya, and that ignorance makes the jiva possible. Now, are they separate? Is Maya and ignorance, avidya, are they then separate? No. Avidya is a part of Maya, all right? But the question then is Ishwara affected by avidya? And the answer is no, because Ishwara is not a big person. Okay, Ishwara does not have an ego. Ishwara is not identified with the objects that appear in Atma. All right, only the individual person with the ego is able to identify with those things. So we can say that Ishwara is the controller of Maya, the powers of it being the ignorance, the avidya, and the projection, and jiva is controlled by those powers. So that's why there is the distinction. Sometimes Ishwara is described as Atma in association with pure sattva. Okay, and the reason for that being because Ishwara is the total knowledge and skill required to create and maintain the creation, but it is not affected by the powers of Rajas and Tamas, although it wields them. You can think of it as being there's a craftsman that has tools, but those tools do not affect the craftsman itself. You know, if a craftsman has a hammer and he hammers a nail, he himself is not hammered. Okay, he just wields that hammer. Now again, this metaphor falls a little bit short because Ishwara wields the hammer and is the hammer, so to speak, the hammer of Rajas and Tamas, but it is not affected by that ignorance and projection. Okay, so that is why they are described as being differently. You know, the question again was, what's the difference between Maya and ignorance? Okay, Maya is the total upadi that is composed of the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. Ignorance is tamoguna, or tamas. That makes avidya, or ignorance, possible. So you can look at it as saying that Maya is the totality, and ignorance is one aspect of that totality. Or you could look at it as saying that Maya is the total upadi that makes the entire, is the Atma associated with the entire creation. And you could say that then jiva would be the Atma in association with just the individual ignorance that allows that identification with the individual to be possible in the first place. So they are the same insofar as Maya is one part. Maya is the totality and ignorance is one part. But to say one more time, Ishwara is not deluded by its own powers of ignorance. And so we can say then that while Ishwara wields the powers of Maya, the jiva is controlled by the powers of Maya. And so I hope that this video answered that question in detail. If there's still any questions about this topic, feel free to email me at onevishnudeva@gmail.com, or you can just leave a comment below. And thank you for joining me this week, and everybody take care.